Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky all up in your podcast. It's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for pressing play. And today, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. I know it's kind of a cliche joke, but if I say who my guest is, he may have to kill me. I don't know. We'll see. Merle Rasmussen, the man in the tux himself. And if you've ever been to an RPG convention that Merle is at, then you'll know what I mean by the man in the tux. For most of the days, he'll wear a t-shirt that looks like a tux. And then on the last day, he'll wear an actual tuxedo and run a top secret game. So Merle has actually done a lot. He sent me a really cool resume that I'll pick some stuff out of to ask him about. So he's done more than this in life, but he's most well known among role-playing gamers for Top Secret, which 1981 was the first espionage role-playing game. And he was working at TSR at the time, and TSR put it out. But he's done some other cool stuff that we'll get into as well. But anyway, welcome to Shane Plays Geek Talk, Agent 00 Amazing. How are you?
Well, I'm the administrator, and I don't have
You're
a
the
code
administrator.
number.
Yeah.
So my code name is the administrator, and appreciate you contacting me, Shane. I wanted to correct one thing in your wonderful introduction. I wrote Top Secret, and it was published in February 1980, and it wasn't until 82 that TSR hired me. So I was a sophomore in college when it was when I received a contract from TSR.
If only you had sent me a very thorough resume
Yes.
that has that on there. I noticed you were like freelance writer, then you were working at TSR for a couple of years, then you were a freelance writer again. This is the most thorough resume I've ever seen. This is a dossier. This resume is a dossier. So I need a little attaché case to carry it around in. But anyway, so you were a freelance game designer / writer, sophomore in college, when they published Top Secret. So, and it was the first espionage role-playing game, very well received. In fact, I owned the second edition when I was like, I was pretty young when I can literally remember calling my mom because I had a coupon for like a store. I don't know if it was Walden Books or some store I had a coupon for. And I was like, Mom, how do I figure out this 10% coupon? She was at work. I called her at work and she told me. And I said, okay. I said, I've got enough for this Top Secret game. Can I get it? And she said, yes. So I remember lovingly looking through that. And your first adventure, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, that sort of introductory adventure, but it means street of don't speak or don't speak town or something.
It's the only three German words I knew. But Spreckenhaltestelle translates to the speaking stopping place, where people stop talking. But the funny part was the Top Secret, the first edition sold 30,950 copies. The second edition was 194,301 copies. So I think that's about 214,000 copies over 7 years. The good news is my percentage stayed the same, but the price of the game went from $10 the first year to $12 the second year. So the royalty, the money increased. Just interesting how royalties work.
That is interesting because, I mean, a lot of what I've read and researched and heard about TSR was, I'm surprised they didn't try to, they're like, hey, we're doing a second edition now, so we're going to renegotiate that royalty. I mean, they've literally boxed games up or changed introductory adventures to avoid like royalties and things like that. So from what I understand, so I'm glad that you kept your same royalty rate.
You're partially interesting. 7 years after the game came out, TSR was tired of paying me royalties, and they offered to pay me a year's worth of royalties if I would sell the rights to them. And so I took the cash. I did. uh,
Right.
take a year's worth of royalties. Yeah, they didn't have to sell it. I got the
Right.
money. I believe they offered Jim Ward the same deal on Gamma World, and I don't think he took it. But
You didn't.
he maintained control of Gamma World. I did not. Well, at the
Right.
time, TSR decided to downsize. In fact, their bankers insisted on it. They had to downsize about 50 employees every 6 months, and I made it to the third cut. So I left the company, and then there was a 30-year hiatus of me doing role playing. And I actually had to go out in the real world and find a paying job. So that's why you see so many jobs listed under my resume.
Right. Well, you have never set. There's no moss on Merle. You've never sat on your haunches. Let me tell you that. You have worked. There's something that I want to ask you about before we move further into TSR, top secret, other your writing. You've done quite a bit. I bought a game from you at North Texas RPG Con called. It's a card game called I Choose to Rise. All right, and it's it's a playing card deck. In fact, you can play it as playing cards, but it's actually a game. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this? I Choose to Rise. I thought this was really interesting.
It was out of my wheelhouse, but I had a publisher. I'd already done one card game for them. 10 years later, they had a client, and they wanted an educational card game honoring Black heroes who chose to rise and make a difference. And I'm going to have to cheat by looking at my own copy of the game, but rise means something, and it means respect, integrity, self-awareness, and engagement. And they're trying to teach Black kids, but also kids of any color, about Black history. Now, the people in the game, I just happened to find Louis Armstrong. He's the king of self-awareness, and Louis, also named Satchmo, was among the most influential figures in jazz. And it lists his day of birth, day of death, and some other trivia about him. He was born and raised in New Orleans, and Louis's career spanned 50 years. The reason I read this card to you, what you have to do in the game is get 2 kings or 4 kings. You're trying to match these things up, and the kings are all men, the queens are women, the jacks are men, the tens are women, all the way down to the ace card. The ace is you. You are the wild card, and you can make up a pair or a set of 4. And aces are wild. They can have any rank or suit the player holding it chooses. And it's teaching young people that they can have respect, integrity, self-awareness, and engagement. The people I designed this for loved the concepts. They came to me with a list of Black activists over the past 3 centuries. And I said, no, nobody's going to want a game just on Black activists. Let's talk about Jackie Robinson, the first African-American to play Major League Baseball. Or let's talk about Louis Armstrong or President Obama. These are wonderful historical piece. So I'm teaching this. They ordered 3,000 copies. They sent me the royalty check, and then they said, oh, and we're releasing it in February 2024, Black History Month. Now, what's fascinating, you can't see me, but I'm Danish American. I'm not Black. So this is the point of being a game designer. Because outside my wheelhouse, it's a game that teaches kids at a 4th grade reading level how to read, how to do math, and to learn about history all in one card deck. I hope that answers your immediate question, Shane. But it
does.
I'm hoping to do sequels. Let's put it that way. And I need to be in contact with their company. They have talked to me about a possible Pan-African deck, which would include famous blacks from world history. As you may know, there were black pharaohs and there were blacks in the Caribbean, and not just African Americans. There
Right.
are blacks all over the world. So
Right.
it's fascinating to go from a large rule set, like a role-playing game, trying to get the rules to fit on one playing card front and back. That was the challenge for me. Yes.
And how did that happen? How did you get connected into that? I
Well,
understand that, like, they said, hey, we're going to do this game about activists. And you said, hey, well, let's expand it to include just, exceptional individuals regardless. But how did you actually get connected into that?
well, the publisher who contacted me had let me get the name here, Dr. Artika Tyner, an educator, award-winning author, civil rights attorney. She's written several books for her company, Planting People and Growing Justice, at the Planting People Growing Justice Leadership Institute. Now, she has lots of books for kids and adults to teach them leadership, but they'd never done a card game. Well, a publisher, I should say a middleman, knew me. I had done a head injury prevention card game 10 years before, which sold 3,000, 4,500 copies to the state of Iowa's, I'm trying to remember, basically their health department for the state of Iowa. They were giving the card games to fourth grade classrooms to teach children not to injure their brains. Well, I designed that game. And so 10 years later, the same guy had a new client, and he knew I could do a card game. He contacted me and asked if I would do a game teaching black history and black heroes. It's sometimes not what you know, but who you know.
Sure. Yeah.
And it helps when things sell. It gets people's attention. And so
Right,
the first
yeah.
game had sold 1,000 copies, and then another 1,000, and up to 4,500 copies. This game, they started out at 3,000 copies. So at about a $9.95 retail, it's I need to check to see how it's selling, because I'd like to do a
Right.
reprint, or I'd like to do a sequel.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I knew that it wasn't the case, but I just had this wonderful fantasy of, like, these people at the PPLI, the Planning People Growing Justice. That's it. They were all sitting around playing Top Secret. And they were like, hey, you know who can make our card game for us? It's Merle.
The answer is unlikely they had ever heard of Top Secret.
Yeah.
However, like you, I could send them a resume and prove that I was an American game designer and I'm still
Right.
alive. That'll,
Right.
The dead game designers don't get as much work as I do. But
It's funny how that works.
Yeah,
it's strange.
I'm always interested to, says a freelance designer, I'm always designing what I like, and then I go find a publisher. This time the publisher approached me. So it's a very interesting direction. It's a two-way street.
Isn't that nice when it works that way? So we are definitely going to talk about Top Secret, how you came to make it, and the its impact on, role playing, and then espionage role playing and that sort of thing. I did want to go through and ask you a few questions based on your resume you sent me, with a focus on your game design, if you don't mind. First thing that caught my eye, above and beyond the obvious, freelance writing and game design, it looks like you actually worked at Alliance Miniatures in the casting. You were casting miniatures. Tell me a little bit about that. What was that like?
Well, Alliance Miniatures was in West Des Moines, and they actually they cast 15 millimeter military miniatures. For example, your Napoleonics. They do entire armies in 15 millimeter. Well, they needed a casting machine operator, and I happened to need a job at the time. And so I was the one actually lighting lighting off the melting pot, and we'd put lead alloy into the melting pot, and then I would ladle it into a spinning rubber mold, and it's a centrifugal casting machine. And then after the lead gets poured down the center, you wait a few minutes for the lead to harden, you peel apart the rubber, and you have a Napoleonic army. Or they also expanded and bought rights for miniatures that were being manufactured in the greenware, the little figurines. They're coming out of Europe, and this was an American company working off of European figurines. So we had, I believe they expanded into science fiction and fantasy, but no, their strength was 15 millimeter Napoleonic and other little armies, so to speak.
And I don't think people a lot of modern gamers, I'm aware of this now because I've been a bit of an armchair scholar. I don't think people realize how big that type of wargaming was in the 60s, 70s, even in the 80s. I mean, you got like Warhammer and stuff now and a few other tactical war games, but that Napoleonic or these, that was huge at one time. I mean, in fact, a lot of, role playing came out of that. So were you into that at the time? Like what led you into working with Alliance?
Well, I did need employment, and I was the sales clerk at a game shop in Des Moines. These guys would come in to buy games, and I found out they paid a nickel more an hour than the sales clerk position. So I went to work with them at Alliance Miniatures till I found out that as the shortest term employee, I had the highest lead levels in my blood. This is not a healthy workplace.
Yeah.
What they didn't inform me was that I should be wearing a mask and also not breathing the fumes as they come off the hot lead alloy mixture. So after went through chelation therapy, eating baked apples to get the chemicals out of my blood, I was not symptomatic, but I was beginning to become lethargic and let's put it this way. It was affecting my nervous system. It was time to leave. I didn't have lead lines in my bones, but I was tired and I was losing weight. These are symptoms of lead poisoning. And so
right.
I did leave Alliance Miniatures and went back to a game shop, but I was then a general manager. So I worked in retail as well as manufacturing, in addition to being a freelance writer. Just a little heads up there.
So, so they didn't, and I'm not trying to hammer on Alliance. I mean, this was back in the 80s. Whoever's there now wouldn't have been the people there then. Assuming if they're still around, there's an Alliance now that does plastic scale model kits. So I don't know if that's the same company or not. But so they didn't give you any safety training at all. They just said, "Here, off you go."
Yes. That is correct. In fact, one of the strangest things is I was lighting off my melting pot one day. Suddenly there was an explosion near my ears, and my ears were ringing from the explosion. Nearby buildings called in to see what happened in our building. I'd used a Bic lighter, and I left it lying underneath the melting pot. And anybody that's a firefighter or a welder knows, do not put Bic lighters in your pockets because heat will set them off. Well, I blew up a butane lighter underneath a lead alloy melting pot, and I had ringing in my ears for several minutes from the concussion.
Wow. And that was loud enough that nearby buildings heard it?
Oh, yeah. The next door buildings called to see what happened in our factory. Now, the funny part was that should have been a telltale sign I didn't know what I was doing. But what was really scary...
Maybe we need to give Merle some training.
Yes, they did test all the employees for lead in our blood, and I was the lucky winner of the highest lead level. And I'd worked there the shortest time. Pretty scary.
Yeah, wow. All right.
Anyway, just a tale of warning. Nowadays, with our 3D printers and all these good things, you don't see lead alloy miniatures. It's just not done.
Yeah, the 3D. I was trying to tell my son the other day, he got a 3D printer for Christmas, and I'm like, this is sci-fi compared to when I was growing up. I mean, this is like I'm watching sci-fi happen, right? With just just grab a computer file, hit a button, and print what I want. And there's some really amazing things you can do with the 3D printers. So another thing you mentioned, you worked at a couple of different game shops. Before you worked at TSR, I noticed you had this. It says Game Room Productions, where you were the sales person and president. So what was that about?
I knew that Top Secret was going to be coming out in February 1980, but in the meantime, I dropped out of college, formed a company called Game Room Productions with a couple friends, and we decided to produce a fantasy triangular card game called Squirm. And in Squirm, the job was to build a dragon, conjure up a dragon one card at a time, heads, tails, wings, smooth sections, while the other players are attacking your dragon with knights, damsels, eggs, and treasure. And it was a nice beer and pretzels game. Well, we printed 10,000 sheets of cards, and 3 sheets made up a game. And we had little boxes printed that were modeled after animal cracker boxes. And I had a rule set that I had overwritten, needed a good editor at the time. But we produced 3,333 copies of Squirm, the fantasy triangular card game. And it's my art on the cards, and it's my art on the box. Now, this is funny. I had 2 high school friends. The game did not sell well. In the business that transacted, I lost money and I lost 2 friends. So I learned at a very early stage, in fact, 1979, that 81, 82, that I didn't want to invest my own money. I would contact publishers, and if they thought my work was worthy, they would offer me rights. They'd either buy the rights outright or they'd pay me royalties in a contract, either way as a contract, and I would no longer use my own money to self-publish. And so my entire career after Squirm is using other people's money to be published. It's something you can think about. Yes.
Well, I love getting that kind of insight from guests, because there's a lot of people that, they have stars in their eyes about being an author or comic book creator or game designer or, making and selling video games. And it's always a good reminder there's a business aspect to it. And most successful people have several failure stories, right? Because you have to learn lessons. So, so I'm assuming there's you had made a note of in 1979 in the Gazette Reporter and Mendon Shelby News, there was high school hobby may become big business for Underwood Trio. So I assume that's what the game company that you're referring to there with your 2 friends. Yeah. So, and Squirm is spelled like, isn't it SQURM? It's not.
It's SQWURM.
Yeah, I knew it was spelled a little different. Yeah.
And I've seen it now on some candy bar or something in a vending machine. Yeah. There's a product called Squirm, and it's an edible product. I don't know if it was gummy worms or something, but I used worm after the Old English for dragon, WURM, Squirm. I designed the game for my nephews, who is a non-numerical card game. And the pictures on the cards, you build a dragon. Here they were, elementary age kids, and they said, "Oh, look how these cards squirm around. Look how my dragon squirms around." I said, "That's it. They squirm," using the spelling of worm. Nice. WURM. So you take your inspiration where it comes from, but if elementary kids call it squirm around. It squirms. That's what you use for the title of the game. Yes.
So is that you mentioned you did the art for Squirm?
Yes.
Have you done much other art in any of your game stuff? Or
in the game industry, no. Mostly it was pre-game industry. I worked as an audiovisual technician for the state of Iowa in a what was it? It was a area educational agency, and educators would have they'd want a game board designed, or they would want a film strip produced, or they would want something illustrated or a map enlarged. And I was the graphic artist that would do that for educators. Well, sometimes I would actually do posters for activities and coloring, and I'd do the basic artwork. And I was involved with a sleeping dragon and the volcanoes, a cross section of volcanoes, and an Easter egg poster and an October poster named "Greetings from Transylvania," and a Thanksgiving poster. Well, I did the underlying art, and then the classroom kids would color it, do the do the maze, do the word unscramble, do the crossword puzzle, color in this poster that I had designed. And we sent thousands of them, no, let's say hundreds of them, throughout southwest Iowa as an activity for children. So that was most of my artwork before Squirm. I did the cards, and I did on the cards on Squirm. I used a spirograph to do this, to draw the scales on the dragon. I used a spirograph as a drawing tool, and then altered them, because some of the things you can do is curse the other person's dragon, which puts the fork in their body, and so they would have two heads or two tails or a loop in their body. So Squirm, I actually could go to a game convention and do a 3-minute spiel and sell a $10 card game every 3 minutes. So that was the height of Squirm, and now it's a collectible. Yes.
Yeah, it sounds fun. It's actually pretty. I don't know the word I'm looking for. Especially for high school age, that's pretty intricate. I don't know quite the word I'm looking for, like polished, or it sounds pretty interesting. I'm looking at pictures of it. It looks really cool. I wouldn't mind playing it sometime. But so I'm trying to get the timeline right in my head. So if you did you write the majority of Top Secret while you were in high school, and then sell it, and it came out while you were in college? How did that happen? Like,
actually, I'd never heard of Dungeons and Dragons until October in 1975. I was a freshman at Iowa State University.
So you were in college at that time?
Yes, okay. I was in college, and a friend introduced me and said, "Hey, let's go play this new game." And I was put in, my character was in charge of pulling the mules through the dungeon, but I was not allowed to look in the backpacks that were on board the pack mules. And after about 4 hours, I found this particularly boring. But anyway, Dungeons and Dragons did not impress me. I should say fantasy role-playing did not impress me, but the role-playing inspired me. So in other words, didn't care for fantasy, really liked the idea of role-playing. However, didn't realize, I was not into reading Tolkien and other fantasy authors. I had grown up watching TV spies and movie spies, James Bond being the leader, but Mission Impossible was a Get Smart. There are many TV and movies during my childhood. Well, didn't realize I wrote up role-playing rules. I eventually was playing them with my boyhood friend who became my college roommate, and he was a secret agent who turned into a world-class villain. His character was a secret agent turned into a world-class villain, and I was the administrator. Didn't understand what we were doing, except after a year, he said, this is pretty good. You ought to send it to the TSR company. I said, well, who are they? Well, they wrote that Dungeons and Dragons game. So I contacted TSR, asked if they'd be interested. They said, yeah, send us a copy of your rules. I sent them a photocopy of my rules, and they wrote back. There was a note on the letter I got back from Gary Gygax, and it said, accept this manuscript as soon as it is typed. So then I had to hire typists at Iowa State University, not on the payroll, but people that type dissertations. They typed the rules for me. They kept quitting on me, but we got the rules typed, photocopied it, sent it into TSR. They sent back a royalty contract. I was probably a junior in college by that time, and being didn't know what I was doing, they offered me a percentage of every copy ever sold. And,
sure.
Well, my only thought that went through my mind is, I will regret this if I don't try it. If I don't do it, I'll regret it. So, signed the contract, sent it back. They verified what was happening, meaning everybody signs the contract. Their side contract, I signed the contract, and we were off and running. I didn't know why I was still in college because I had a writing contract already. And eventually I dropped out of college, and they held on to the manuscript, play tested it, edited it, and finally published it in February 1980. Well,
and what year was it that you submitted again? I'm sorry to interrupt. What year was it?
Let's see. I was introduced. It was October of '75. I was introduced to Dungeons and Dragons. I thought it was a Halloween game. It was October, so that's why I thought D&D was for Halloween only. So from '75 to '76, I started writing, and so by probably '77, after playtesting for a year, probably 1977 is when I submitted the game to TSR.
And they came out in 1980.
Yeah, it came out in 1980. So it's trailing Dungeons and Dragons by 6 years. D&D came out, 74. Yeah.
So the only high school connection is the game company you formed included a couple of high school friends.
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure to get that right. So, okay. And then at some point your association with TSR led them. Now, did they just call you up and say, hey, do you want a job? Or did you ask them and say, hey, do you have any positions? Because for a couple of years you were a game designer in the research and development department for TSR. So how did that come about?
Well, obviously, Top Secret was selling, and I had been corresponding with Mike Carr. Once this contract was signed, they sent the manuscript over the wall to an editor by the name of Alan Hammock. Alan Hammock and I corresponded for several years as he edited the work, and then the game was published. 2 years down the road after that, Alan called. He needed game designers. TSR needed people who could design. And he said, well, we're offering so much money. Would you come work for us? Over the phone, he asked me this. And I said, well, I got to think about it. And I hung up the phone. And my brother said to me, they're offering you how much? I said, well, a few $1,000s to come work for them. And my brother said, why isn't your bag packed? Why aren't you going out the door already? Because it was a dream job, be a designer for TSR. So,
and I take it, so just personally at this point, were you married yet?
No, I was single.
Okay.
I was single.
Okay. So you didn't even have to talk to your wife.
Yeah. So it was a golden opportunity. I didn't even have a cat or a dog. I mean, I was a single guy. And
I would have been out the door while I was still on the phone.
Yes. So one of the funnies is I showed up at TSR, and Alan Hammock was taking me around and introducing me to people, including his boss. And his boss took a look at my resume and turned it over and said, well, Mr. Rasmussen, most of our designers either have a degree in English or journalism, and I can't seem to find you have a degree in either of those. And I said, well, no, I don't have a college degree in anything at the time. And Alan Hammock defended me and said, Mr. Rasmussen is the author of the top secret role-playing game.
Yeah.
And that ended the discussion there, whether I was qualified or not. But I found it amusing.
Do you remember who his boss was? Do you remember it? Do you feel comfortable sharing who that was?
It was I'd rather not share it, but I can't remember anymore.
Okay. All right. Yeah,
That is funny, though.
So, yeah, that's not fun to get grilled after you've already been hired and you're there. You're like, wait a minute, I'm hired, right? I'm here, right? That's funny. So do you have any, like the 2 years you were there, do you have any fun memories or any particular, obviously you developed a pretty good relationship with Alan Hammock. Do you have any good memories or funny stories of any of the other people? Because you were there during of an interesting time for TSR. Yeah.
I was hired right before they peaked and they fell. As a matter of fact, even though I was known for espionage, they assigned me to write Dungeons and Dragons, which I was not crazy about, but it's a paycheck. And so I was writing, and I wound up at the time everybody was in a hotel, an old hotel they converted into offices. And they assigned me an office, which had been a bathroom in a hotel suite. And to get to me, you had to walk through my boss's office, Alan Hammock's office, to get to his converted bathroom, which was my office. And I at least had a window I could look out so I could see what the weather was doing. And the other designers couldn't get to me. It was very odd. Eventually, we moved out of that hotel in downtown Lake Geneva to a brand new facility that was built out on Sheridan Springs Road. And now we're in cubicle land. And I remember designers came to work dressed any way we wanted, and the editors came to work in suit and tie. They were professionals. We were freelance. We were more easygoing. And
you were quote unquote the creative team.
We were the creative team. And we'd do things like have tugs of war at company picnics, and we would lose miserably to other groups. At one time, people were bringing their suction cup guns to work, and we would run through cubicle land and shoot people not in their office, but not in their cubicle, but if they're in the hallway, you could shoot them.
Right.
That was fun. I'm trying to think of some of the more amusing things that happened. I had a supervisor they closed the door to his office. His supervisor was berating him, get your publisher, get your writers to create faster. And what the guy didn't realize is there was a 6 to 8 inch gap above the wall of the cubicle. We could hear every word he was saying to our boss. So it was like we're all sitting there listening to this guy getting yelled at for us not being productive enough. So that was amusing. Also, I was tasked with doing Dungeons and Dragons, and you may see some of my work that's now collectible, 35, 40 years later. We went to conventions. The first year we went to a convention, I was the new kid, and I was frightened. The second year, we were in an auditorium, and people wanted to know about the top secret, and I started talking about Siamese attack cats and fighting with outboard motors and all kinds of bizarre things people asked me questions about. And I had the audience in my hand. They were entertained, and I had them laughing. And once you can do that with a new audience, you sold the game. What I didn't know at the time was in the back row was a teenager, and his father had brought him to the convention. Years later, when I was downsized from TSR, wound up on the same church committee with this gentleman. He was the director of human resources for a corporation. His son was a fan of Top Secret, and they needed a technical writer to compile their headquarters employee handbooks. Could I do that? Yes, I could do large scale rule books, policies, procedures, benefits, table of contents, index for a corporation due to my writing experience. So my career took off in the corporate world as a technical writer in a human resources department. And that led to a corporate communications manager, charge of internal communications, which led to a database manager, an archivist for the company. I worked on a lot of special projects, and I was with that company for 35 and a half years. So Dungeons and Dragons, Top Secret, has been very good for me. Yes.
So that's fantastic. So you had a presentation at a convention. It was Gen Con? Was it?
Yes, Gen Con.
Okay, it was Gen Con.
It was Kenosha, Wisconsin.
So you did a presentation that was very well received by the audience. In that audience was somebody listening that directly led to you being offered a job after you were downsized after TSR. That's fantastic.
That is correct. That is correct.
That's great. And it's another reminder to people that there's a couple of things you said that are interesting. One, a lot of people, think, oh, well, this guy wrote Top Secret or he worked at TSR. So all he's done his whole life is just been a full-time game designer. And that's actually rare for that to be the case. A lot of people do it on the side, or they start their own company and, struggle through hard times and good times just out of pure love for it. Some people throw in the towel. But you've kind of balanced both, and then you came back a few years later, and we'll talk about this also later in the show, where you did a new version of Top Secret. But the thing that jumped out at me, again, reminding people that in many ways this is a job, they assigned you to write D&D in early TSR, or not early 80s TSR, and you're like, I didn't even want to do that. And there's people out there that would chew off their own lips to have been writing, you know what I mean? So it's always interesting to learn the personalities behind the scenes. Because for you, it was like, yeah, this is neat, but it's also a paycheck. But I'm also more interested in espionage than I am, the October game, as you put it. But that does lead into a couple things I wanted to bring up. One, I found, you may have already seen this, but on Reddit, about 7 months ago, somebody posted a thank you to Merle Rasmussen. Have you seen this?
Go ahead and read it to me, because I do see them from time to time.
Okay. It says, now it's going to talk about Lathan's Gold, and if I remember right, Lathan's Gold was a solo module.
It was published in 84. Yeah.
Yeah, it says, I initially got Lathan's Gold like 35 plus years ago when I was very young, and played the F out of it. For a quarter century, the module was in a place I could not return to. Today, I received it from someone who could get to it. Its well-worn cover and pages are a testament to how solo I once was. I thoroughly enjoyed this sandbox-esque module that he offered the whole spectrum of classes as characters. Though I appreciated the variety, Lathan rescuing his lady friend got the most play. Thank you, Mr. Rasmussen. Your art helped keep me going when I needed some help keeping going.
I had not read that. I will tell you that during my employment with TSR, we received lots of fan mail, and I would respond to it. Sometimes it would just be a rules clarification. I would collect those questions and answers into a Rasmussen file, which would be published in Dragon Magazine. But I had young people would ask me questions about, hey, I want to be this, but my dad doesn't want me to be that when I grow up. What should I do?
Wow.
I would answer them like Dear Abby. We all struggle with this dilemma. Do you do what you want, or do you do what you're told? It's a dilemma of growing up. However, it's your life. It's your decision. You have to live within those parameters or those rules. And years later, people responded in various social media that I had inspired them to become what they are today, whether they were a policeman or a doctor or a soldier or a whatever. And then they told me these wonderful stories how Top Secret had changed their life. One of the biggest ones was a man met me at a convention in Wisconsin, and he shook my hand, thanked me for the game. He said, "You don't know this, but I have PTSD from the Gulf War." And we got back to the States, and I've been in a Texas hospital with other people suffering from PTSD. And we recreated our battle situations using your rule set, Top Secret. And it was very verifying. It was very uplifting. The other PTSD soldiers said, I would have done the same thing if I were in that situation. So it was used as a therapeutic device by soldiers. Well, of course, I thanked him for his service, but it struck me that I'm not in control of how people use my rules. And I never had realized that it could be used therapeutically. I had heard from a police officer who'd been trained in hostage negotiating. There was nothing on the market for teaching hostage negotiating to police officers. And so they were using Top Secret rules to teach officers how to do this in one of the major cities, Washington or Oregon. So you have an influence. When you write something, you never realize what influence you're going to have on the public.
Wow. That's, yeah. See, and that, I keep stressing the business side. Those are great examples. If it's not just a business, there's a side to it where these games and the creators inspire and get inside people in a way, that other things won't. Right. I mean, as much as I love reading or, watching movies or whatever, you interact with a role-playing game in a different way. Your brain engages with it in a different way. So that's magnificent. And I am hearing more stories the past few years of role-playing games being used for therapeutic purposes, but that's fascinating. They were literally using the rules to recreate the combat situation. And then people were like, yeah, I mean, I would have done the same thing, and so that guy's probably been second guessing himself for years. And now, that's amazing. I'm kind of getting goosebumps with you sharing these
That's
stories.
What happened to me.
Yeah.
I had two other things happened to me. Once was heard from parents, and they said, our son is having a bar mitzvah, and he wants a Top Secret theme party after the bar mitzvah. Well, I didn't even know what that was, but I got a Top Secret poster and signed it, from the administrator. Right. Congratulations on your bar mitzvah, and sent it off. So my mind was being expanded beyond my background, that people not like me were playing the game. Recently, I was at GaryCon, and a woman came to the table, and she set a little box down, and she said, we have a gamer who died, and his wife had him cremated. These are his ashes. Would you please, as a game designer, bless his ashes? And I went, I thought it was a joke. And then she took out her camera to film me blessing the deceased gamer's ashes so they could spread them on the grounds of the convention. Now that took me back a moment. And she said, we're doing this with all the major game designers so that, and I said, well, what is the deceased name? And she told me the guy's name. And I said, well, and she said, you don't even have to be religious. So it was like, okay, Wes, I have a brother, Wes. And, my advice to you is keep your powder dry and your head low. I mean, that's just off the top of my head. And she thanked me very much, and she put her, ashes back and her camera back. And
wow.
And this is the level you hear from teenagers that want to play Lathan's Gold and all the, can I play more than one character at a time, and those kind of questions. But when adults come forward and are saying, I want you to meet my children, Mr. Rasmussen, or you made me want to become a forensic pathologist, or I was speaking at a local gathering, a prairie festival here in town at a worship service. I spoke during the offertory. Afterwards, one of the pastors came up and said, "You're Merle Rasmussen." "Yes." "You wrote Top Secret." "Yes." "Can I have my picture taken with you?" And I'm like, what's going on? He said, "I played your game in boot camp. I played your game in seminary, and my kids all want to be game designers." And I went, what? What is going on?
Wow. That's great.
He never put two and two together that I lived in the same town. He knew my wife. He didn't know me. And it was just
until that moment.
I didn't know till that moment. And I have to realize that, again, what you do has an effect on other people in this world, good or bad. And I try to say that it's a good. I have to be careful of what I do. I don't want to teach people how to commit crime. That's one thing I steer away from. You might also notice my work, I steer away from sex, politics, and religion. Three things that are rather personal. I stay away from them. That's just my choice as a writer. But I hope that's the direction you wanted with this impersonal interview.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's, I love this. So that's one of the reasons why, I mean, I'll have certain questions I want to ask, but I leave the format kind of loose because I want the conversation to be able to go in directions I wasn't anticipating. That's amazing. Before I forget to mention the person that was like, thank you on Reddit, regarding Lathan's Gold, his Reddit handle is big nose dog, and he had himself or her, could be whoever they are, they had themselves tagged as a cleric. So and talking about having the ashes, having game designers speak over, bless, if you will, the ashes at a game convention, that just shows you how much people just connect with these games and this hobby and what it is, and I'm not arguing for or against changes in gaming. That's not what this is about, but this is why people react so strongly when people make a change to a well-known game, right? A part of them identifies with that game. So it's not just a bunch of rules on a page. For a lot of people, it's much more than that, so, wow, that's fantastic. So going from there, I don't know how you follow up those stories, but moving along, I'm not even going to try. Moving to a different topic. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing all that. So I wanted to touch, we're talking about your TSR work that's not top secret. We will, like I said, we're going to get all into top secret, but there's a lot to unpack here for Merle. One of the things I do on my show is I try to highlight the stuff that is not what they're the most well known for. There's this wonderful article. In fact, you and I discussed it briefly at North Texas RPG Con that John Peterson wrote about your Quagmire module. And it's this amazing article. I'll link it in the show notes. Folks, go to shaneplays.com or just search for Quagmire, John Peterson, or Quagmire, or, Merle Rasmussen, and you'll find this article. But it's literally John Peterson it's almost like a documentary, but in written format. And he follows a module at TSR from, hey, I need pitches, all the way through to publication. And it just happened to be Merle's module Quagmire with an exclamation point on it. So any idea how John landed on this article or this module, and how did this all happen?
Well, I know quite well how it happened. Originally, the working title was Quagmire of the Swamp King, and it had been pitched by someone else, and then I was assigned to it. TSR at the time was selling to book companies, Walden Books and others. They were selling the title before it had been written. So I was given Ghost. Yeah, no kidding. They would actually say, we're going to produce this many modules, and here's the name, and here's the level for the players, and then
before
they would
it was
assign
even
it.
written.
Before
so
it was
selling
written.
it on title. Okay, that's the first I've heard of that.
Oh yeah, I did several that way. But Quagmire was Quagmire of the Swamp King. Got shortened to Quagmire. It was X6. It was an expert game adventure for Dungeons and Dragons, and Quagmire. Let's put it this way: John Peterson contacted me at a convention once and said, "Merle, do you happen to have any correspondence from the 1980s?" And this is before the age of the internet. And I said, well, let me go home and see if I have anything. Went home, found 5 boxes of paper, and I mean sheets of paper. I had saved every document that I'd ever crossed my path at TSR. And I took my 5 boxes and arranged them in chronological order, and took them to one of the conventions, and John was there, and I said, yes, I have this. You want to buy it? And of course he did. Well, I had all of the planning, the rough drafts, the editing for Quagmire completely documented from the beginning to the end. And it took a long time to produce Quagmire because TSR kept publishing other things. Well, this was titled, Quagmire X6. So John asked me how much did I want for this 9 boxes of paper. I said, there's 9,000 sheets of paper here. And he said, no, quote me a price. And I quoted him a price, and he said, it's worth more than that. So this convention, I sold him 9,000 sheets of paper. And I said, I'm going home. There might be another box in the basement. I had another box of 1,000 sheets of paper, which he bought from me at the next convention. Now, he not only wrote the article about Quagmire, but he has quoted me twice in books that he's published. He's a historian, and I never realized I'd be making money off of historians. Literally, I sold him all of my rejection letters as well from publishers.
Wow. Now, I want to camp out on that briefly, and then I want to get back to it. So, just in case, most people listening to this podcast probably know who John Peterson is. If not, he's in my opinion, he's the tabletop gaming historian out there. There's other people doing it. John does it on a level that is both incredibly scholarly and fantastically researched, but well presented. And you don't have to be an academic to read his stuff, but it's researched and presented on an academic level. I literally one time, Merle, to show you when he said, you're like, oh, I have 9,000 pieces of paper, to show you how rabid historians are for this. It's like archaeology, because role-playing games have impacted pop culture so much and have gone on to impact TV shows and movies and all this other stuff. And video games. Video games owe a lot to D&D and role-playing games. And video games are a dominant form of entertainment now. So I was at a table at North Texas RPG. I think I've related this story on the show before. It was like Alex Kammer from Gamehole Con, who's also a game designer in his own right, game writer. Zeb Cook, I think John Peterson was there. William Meinhardt was there, Bill Meinhardt. There were several people around the table. And Alex and somebody else were talking about the auction or how much it cost for employee memos for Zeb Cook. not game related stuff, but like employee evaluations or like CC'd memos of stuff like, well, it's Zeb's 2-year anniversary or something like that, and this stuff is they were bidding on, right? And
Yes.
so it's not. I mean, that's how important this stuff is to the historians and the collectors. And I looked over Zeb. I had just met Zeb. Alex Kammer. This was several years ago at North Texas, my first North Texas. He was super friendly and invited me to all these, or introduced me, not invited me, introduced me to all these people. And I felt like I had hit the jackpot. Here I am, and I'm a game enthusiast. I'm an armchair historian. And here I am sitting at this table while they're just sitting around, talking about all this stuff. And I looked over at Zeb Cook. I said, because they're talking about his paperwork, his employee paperwork, like it's like they dug it up, Indiana Jones and all this, And I said, how does that make you feel? And he like took a swig of beer and he went, that's pretty cool, and just went back to whatever he was doing. And it was just cool. He was casual about it, but he's like, it's pretty cool. So yeah, it's a moment that I'll probably never forget. But anyway, back to what you were saying. John Peterson, amazing historian. You sold him all this paperwork, which he probably felt like he hit the jackpot when you did this. And so I'm guessing the Quagmire article came about because a lot of your stuff was about Quagmire. So he was able to trace a through line. Is that what happened?
That is correct. He had even the page layouts, what would appear on pages 1 through 32 in a 32-page module. TSR would assign us to do a module in 8 weeks. Oh, good job. Now do the next one in 7 weeks. Okay, now do the next 32 pages. Do that in 6 weeks. Well, at some point, you burn out. But what was interesting, John spoke to me. He was very generous to me. I wanted my documents saved for perpetuity. I wanted them saved forever by somebody who cared. And so he and I struck up a conversation and a checkbook, and that's linked us together. But I'm now a footnote in his book, The Elusive Shift, How Role-Playing Games Forge Their Identity. And then he wrote, I've lost it here. Oh, Game Wizards, The Epic Battle for Dungeons and Dragons. Now, those 2 books, I'm a footnote. And he even quoted my documents in his book. And there are other anecdotes about Top Secret that other people said and that appear in his books. And his books, I'll just tell you, The Elusive Shift and Game Wizards. And now I also have appeared in a documentary, The Satanic Panic and the Religious Battle for the Imagination, and in the book Slaying the Dragon, A Secret History of Dungeons and Dragons by Ben Riggs. Oh, yes, and I'm in a film, The Dreams in Gary's Basement, Gary Gygax and the Creation of Dungeons and Dragons, which I have the disc, but I haven't watched it yet. That's
good. It's very good. Yeah, it's interesting because The Dreams in Gary's Basement, the director or the person that oversees the whole project, he constantly, like online, and I think even at the beginning of the movie or maybe in the liner notes on the back or something, he's like, we wanted this to be more, but it's a very good. I don't know why he apologizes, because it's actually a really good documentary. But he's like, yeah, we wanted, and I'm like, man, this is a good documentary. So I've actually seen it. Another book by John Peterson, of course, Playing at the World. That's the one that made his reputation. And he's coming out with a new edition of Playing at the World that's in 2 volumes. So I wonder if you and Top Secret make that as well. In fact, it just so happens my next interview is with John Peterson. He's been on the show several times. So we're going to talk about the new edition of Playing at the World and all that. So anyway, all right.
Yeah, please give John my regards. I know that he moved from San Diego to Maine, and I'll pick up the phone and I'll say, hey, somebody needs photos of me from the 1980s. Do you have them? And he said, oh, yeah, I think I'm the executive producer on that. I'll just send them out to California for you. So it's a very interesting position. I'm a game designer, and he is a game historian. He studies the topic.
He's also a nice guy. I've met him. I've talked to him several times. I've met him in person. He's a genuinely nice guy. Very diplomatic too. He's very, very good because there are dramas, there are scandals, whatever. Because the game industry is made up of people, so there's going to be drama. And he's very good at covering that stuff in a very diplomatic, friendly, professional way. So I want to. Anyway, we're here to talk about you and Top Secret and not John. As much as we like John, I just want to recommend, again, people go to the show notes. I'll have a link to the Quagmire article that John did based on the documents that he got from Merle. And it's funny because he breaks down the development process into 9 levels of hell. So, from marketing approval to rewrites to this to that to so it's if you want to know how in the 80s anyway a module at TSR got made, it is the reference. Okay, let's talk about Top Secret. Because I would be remiss and, we've already been going for a while and I don't want to, your time is valuable. So I want to make sure to finish the last part talking about Top Secret, which is how most people, of course, know you in the RPG industry. Now, I know some people know you for your modules. When I was at your table at North Texas, there was a guy who had he had 4 of your D&D modules and was asking you to sign them because I thought they were there to be I thought you had them on display. So I was picking up and looking at them and it was like, oh, it was this other guy. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, and put them back down. In fact, Quagmire was one of the ones. So let me go back. So we're early 80s. I think there was 1980 was first edition. 1982 was second edition. Is that correct for Top Secret?
I'm looking at my own notes. Actually, the first edition was February 80, and then the next edition started February 81. So 1 year later.
Okay. 1 year later. I had the second edition, the color cover, right? Where the first cover was sort of reddish. Or it was kind of a.
Well, there was a, on the back, I think there was a square, a box, and there's some difference between the printing on the back. The covers were very similar. This was called Top Secret Espionage Role-Playing Game. And then later, after I'd sold my rights, Top Secret SI, Special Investigations, was written by Doug Niles. And after that, in 2017, came out Top Secret New World Order, which was a team effort. So the first one I wrote and Alan Hammock edited, and that's the one which most people know about. It was also came out 3 years ahead of the James Bond 007 role-playing game.
Right.
So we didn't just set the bar, we were the bar.
You created the bar, right? You were the 6th. Top Secret was the 6th role-playing game published by TSR, and considering what they ended up publishing before they went out and sold off to, that's pretty early. You established one of the genres. I was going to bring that up, but since you brought it up, I'll go ahead and I think it was Avalon. Was it Avalon Hill that did the 007?
Oh, I think it was West End Games. I'm just trying to remember myself. I thought it was West End. However, I was asked about the Q manual, and I said that's the best supplement produced for Top Secret because it was wonderful. All the James Bond devices appeared in their Q manual, which people then used to play Top Secret.
They cribbed for Top Secret. Yeah. So it was actually Victory Games, which was a subsidiary of Avalon Hill, which is why, because I just looked it up recently. So Avalon Hill was stuck in my head. So, obviously Top Secret showed that an espionage game would sell. So in your opinion, would the James Bond game have happened without Top Secret? Just shooting from the hip. What is your speculation?
I doubt it. We had to prove that people wanted to play a contemporary role-playing game. There was not anything out there that was a contemporary role-playing game. Well, James Bond is obviously fantasy. Espionage is pretty boring in reality. So the
Right.
TV and movie stuff is a fantasy world, so to speak. I also discovered something lately. Nobody seems to care but me. Top Secret was the first game where you play a character who is playing a character. In other words, you are a person playing a secret agent who is playing the part of a Russian diplomat. And so, in other words,
Oh,
you got
right.
a character playing a character, and that's deep. That's a little
That
deeper
is
than some
deep,
people.
actually.
You know?
That's deeper. I think a lot of people, they forget stuff that's innovated in the early days of role playing. They'll be like, they'll come out with a game like today that'll be like, you're playing a character who plays a character who plays a character. That's a new innovation. Nope, it was done way back when. So, yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that, but that's really cool. So, yeah, I remember there was something about Top Secret. Now, I was a big D&D guy. I like D&D. I liked like Star Frontiers, and actually the first role playing game I ever played was Traveler, even though I knew about D&D. I owned Villains and Vigilantes before I think I ever actually owned D&D, even though I played D&D. But I loved fantasy. I was a Tolkien kind of guy, but there was something about Top Secret that just grabbed me. I remember I wanted it really badly. And I remember looking through it and thinking it was really cool. And, looking at that introductory adventure and getting roping my friend into playing Top Secret with me. I distinctly remember he wanted is it the garrote, the string?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He wanted that garrote. He was big on that garrote. And I'm like, are you sure you don't want like no, I want the garrote. Okay. I was trying to get him to get like a pistol. I think I made him take a pistol anyway. But yeah, it was wonderful. It was different. And were you surprised because it was different? Right. And it was were you surprised by how well it did? Do you think TSR was surprised?
I think, of course, they always want things to sell better than they do in reality. I was running about 1/10 as well as the sales of Dungeons and Dragons, and about 1/100th the sales of Advanced D&D at the time. At one time, Top Secret was 7% of the entire adventure gaming market. That's something
great.
People don't know
that's
that.
Big.
At one time,
that's big.
It was,
yeah.
And it received some awards in the early days. John Peterson brought up two innovations that came with Top Secret. The one was fame and fortune points. With fame and fortune points, you could spend them to change the action in the game. For example, my character shoots, or I get shot at, and I use a fame point. I say, no, it didn't kill me. The bullet ricocheted off my belt buckle. Okay. So now I've spent my fame point to change the course of the role play.
Right.
That was an innovation.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that was the first. It was an innovation. And the other thing that didn't get published in game form, it got moved to Dragon Magazine. I was studying to be an engineer, a civil engineer at Iowa State. And I was doing schematic diagrams. And there is a schematic diagram on how to play Top Secret that appeared in an early issue of Dragon Magazine. It didn't make the cut into the box game. But literally, you could move from character creation to getting your equipment to moving to the job site where the mission's going to take place. And this schematic diagram would show you how to play the game. And that was an innovation that had never been done before. So two things, fame and fortune points. And the second thing was a schematic diagram to teach how to play the game. Two Top Secret innovations.
Those obviously, out of those two, the fame and fortune points in one form or another is a lot more common today. I see that in a lot of, in fact, a lot of games, like you'll earn those as you play in a
Mhm.
session, and then you'll spend them and stuff like that, or else you'll get like one per session or something like that. I didn't realize that Top Secret was the first to do that. Where do you remember how you came up with that idea?
It was a last minute thing. They were getting the game ready to typeset, and we needed something to counter the lethality of the game. Obviously, modern weapons are much more deadly than sword fighting. And so they were coming up with something, and I thought about, what do secret agents have? What does James Bond have that sets him apart from other literary characters? Well, he'll even say, "I'm James Bond." He gives away his name to the bad guy.
Right.
So his fame helps direct his mission. And fortune, you never know when your fortune's going to run out. So fame and fortune, suddenly I sent that over to TSR. They had never seen or thought about this idea before, that you could alter the course of the role-playing game by having fame and fortune. One, you knew how many you had because of your level of your character. The other was a
Mm-hmm.
secret to even the player. He didn't know when his luck would run out, when his fortune would run out. So the two mechanisms, fame and fortune, was a last minute change. They put it in the game. It worked. People loved it. It's just was like last minute inspiration before it goes to print, before it goes to publication.
Nice.
Just a surprise, but it worked. It worked.
So did you think of it as like codified plot armor?
I don't even know what that is. Sorry, wrong game system.
Well, do you know what plot armor is, right? Like the hero of the story isn't going to die because he's the hero of the story. So that's plot armor, right? Like when you're watching a TV show or a movie, like this is an ongoing TV series, so Captain Kirk's not going to die. He's got plot armor, right? So it's sort of plot armor.
We don't use that in Top Secret. Yeah.
Okay.
Although I have had players say, "I've been playing this character since the 1980s." So somehow some
Wow.
players make it on, week after week after
Right.
week. Their players want to keep them alive. Um, we used fame and fortune, and then in Top Secret New World Order, we had more first aid to survive drastic injuries. All kinds of things like use this if you get shot by a shotgun, which was developed in warfare. Super glue, for example, and there are other to make the game less lethal. That's what I should call it. And you have to work around. We even got hate mail from Great Britain once because we didn't know a bloody thing about bloody armor and bloody bullets, and so we
Stuff.
published it as is in Dragon Magazine because to Americans it was just hilarious. They were
Right.
cursing out my game system
Right.
for how unreal it was, and
Right.
we published their letter. Bloody didn't mean the same thing to Americans, but also
Right.
Alan Hammock needed to balance the game so that otherwise you get shot once, you're dead. That's not very much fun. You need some cinematic. You get shot at 10 times and you get shot once.
Right.
So
Well,
it's a game balance. Yeah.
that's the thing. Like, how do you balance realism with actually having a chance for the characters to survive? Right. So, because like you said, 007 movies, James Bond, they're spy movies, but they're fantasy movies, right? There's a fantastical element, or like the Chuck Norris movies. I know that's not espionage, but one of the, I think it's Lone Wolf McQuade or something. There's like 10 bad guys blasting away at him, and he just takes his Uzi and sprays and gets them all. And, that's not going to happen in real life. So you have to balance. And like you said, you're an espionage game. You're going more for realism than for the fantasy element of shaken, not stirred, James Bond, because it's James Bond is a fantasy. He's an escapist fantasy, right? He's this unkillable, always going to get the girl, whatever, always has the right device at the right moment. Cool cars, all that. So how when you were designing it, because the there wasn't a lot. Now you had like Traveler, maybe Boot Hill, but there wasn't a lot of stuff on the market right then for like non-fantasy combat. So how did they do most of that during playtesting, or did you come up with most of the combat rules, or how did that work?
If you'll look at the original versions of Boot Hill, the Western role-playing game, you'll find the combat system was lifted. At least the projectile combat system was lifted from Boot Hill into Top Secret. Now, I wrote hand-to-hand combat rules that were extremely detailed and extremely slow. So after the first printing, several pages, like 4 pages of hand-to-hand combat rules were taken out of the first printing, and they don't appear in the second printing. They streamlined hand-to-hand combat. Alan Hammock probably was the editor for that because people complained it was too complex. It was very realistic, but too slow.
Right.
But projectile combat came out of Boot Hill. And you will find also a parallel between Into the Unknown by Mike Carr and Spreckenhaltestelle. You'll find that there are even phrases like instead of monster, it's like your human target. We exchanged the words, and I'm the one that did it. We're looking at, oh, by the way, we have this rule set. Merle, we need a module to go with it, like immediately. So I looked at the G series, the Giant series for Dungeons and Dragons. That wasn't getting my attention, but then they sent me a copy of Into the Unknown by Mike Carr, and it borrowed heavily to create Spreckenhaltestelle, the module in Top Secret.
You know, it's interesting. You know, a lot of what you're saying is you said almost the exact same things in the first issue of Polyhedron magazine, which at the time it was just the RPGA newsletter, but it was later renamed Polyhedron. You have this thing called an open letter to Frank Mincer, and you're talking a lot about Top Secret, and you mentioned in there that you know the modules needed. So you took B1. In Search of the Unknown, and in a lot of ways just almost substituted stuff for it. And then it's interesting in here, you know, you recount in this letter, open letter to Frank Mincer, you say, after being inspired by a Halloween version of an obscure role-playing game at ISU in 1975, that's obviously the D&D game you're talking about.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you started to write, but the idea of it, you said that going underground with a bunch of greedy, bloodthirsty humanoids just didn't excite me too much at 4 a.m. So you wanted something to relate to. So, you know, you were more influenced by like Mission Impossible and I Spy. And then what's interesting is that you pose some questions. So less people think that nobody was ever thinking about this stuff. It's been from the very beginning. You say, why don't more RPG authors have more than one system on the market? And then you say, is anyone else tired of seeing magic and swordplay role-playing games in a fantasy medieval setting? What about some more fresh directions with mass market appeal? What about the modern area and less than Mortal Kombat? What about professions? And then you say, where are the women? I'd like to see more writers and artists of the female gender. What keeps them away from role-playing? So the point is, this was in 1980 or 81 when you were posing all this stuff. So, but it's interesting because you're telling the story the same that it was in 80. And a lot of people over time, not because they're lying or whatever, but because their memories get diluted or they make false memories or they have memories of memories and memories, the story kind of changes over time. But your story is crystal clear, 40 something years later on how all this happened and what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my reference of what year I wrote that. And that was like my only submission to Polyhedron because I was too busy responding to people's fan letters. So I was writing for Dragon magazine at the time, intermittently
Yeah.
published. So it was hard to write for multiple publications at the same time. I was even told once that print magazines are dead, and yet I do see several magazines coming out now, and that surprises me. I suppose a lot of it's more on social media than it is in print form, but
it is. But like I have, there's something about having it in your hands, like there's been here. If you see here, I'm holding up. People listening can't see it, but I have all these zines.
Yes.
And there's just something about having it in your hand that I don't know. I love the internet. I'm a huge internet fan, but there's something about a physical magazine or a physical reference in front of you that, in my opinion, the internet can never, and in some ways it's almost like a hipster thing, like people who are listening to vinyl records again. They don't have to, but they want to, right? So that's kind of like what's going on with the zine thing. Anyway, that polyhedron article was in 1981.
Yes, summer of 81, issue. Pages 12 through 13. I'd like to speak about what's coming next. Has anybody asked you, hey, Merle, are you coming out with a new role-playing game? Why, funny you should ask. Shane?
Hey, Merle, I got more questions about Top Secret, but do you happen to be coming out with any new role-playing games?
I've actually been told to stop writing HackNoia because I've gone through 3 editors now. In other words, the editors keep changing, so I didn't have to write anymore. I'm working with Jolly Blackburn, and he was a huge fan of Top Secret, which I didn't know, and he made a spoof of my role-playing game in his comic strip, and he called his game HackNoia. And I think it's now down to the HackNoia, and the subtitle is the game of supernatural, the game of, what is it we have now? Conspiracy theories, the supernatural, and espionage. So if you can imagine a 21st century game which allows you to go into a world where it has the supernatural and it has the conspiracy theories rolled into espionage. So Jolly, and it's comedy rules for Top Secret. That's how I first started writing it. Comedy rules. Now that's a tough haul because cartoons. There was a toon role-playing game at one time. And,
I remember that.
Yes, Paranoia was another very funny game. It was a spoof. It was a science fiction comedy. We're trying to do, and I coined the phrase, modern gonzo role-playing. And you play, oh my goodness, you might play the part of a Man in Black, or you might play the part of a Ghostbuster, or you might play the part of some other psychic, and it's mix and match, but it's gonzo role playing for the 21st century, and I'm working on it. It's called HackNoia. Well, I'm no longer working on it. The editors are working on it. I was told recently by the Solarian that it is nearing completion. So I'm glad to hear that. I was just
they're playtesting it. I did a search on HackNoia, and they're playtesting it at Gen Con this year. So it says it's unreleased, but Solarian Games claims it's going to get released within the next year. So
yeah. Jason Elliott, the editor, the publisher, says, when I last spoke to Nick Seidler, the HackNoia manuscript was very near completion. His playtest at GaryCon went very well, so I hope we can get it out soon. I will give you more information as I get it. So stand by. Comic rules for espionage.
That's fantastic. When you first said HackNoia, at first I got excited. I think I've heard HackNoia before. I somewhat keep up with Knights of the Dinner Table and Kinzer and Company and Jolly, which, by the way, there was a time when I I didn't miss Knights of Dinner Table. Such a wonderful publication, and Jolly's a very nice guy. He's got Hackmaster and all that. He has a lot of fun with it. He'll take games they're playing in the comic strip and end up making real games out of it. But at first I got excited. I thought they were doing a Hackmaster version of Paranoia, which I know you wrote. You wrote a couple of modules for Paranoia back in the day. I love Paranoia. That was such a great setting, so much fun. People be on the lookout for HackNoia. I did want to ask for Top Secret. Right now the current version is New World Order, which I have a copy of. People are asking you to sign it at North Texas RPG Con and that sort of thing. You said it was a joint effort. You run Top Secret New World Order in a tux, a straight up tux. You'll be in a tux at conventions running this game. What is obviously my main question for New World Order versus the original Top Secret that you wrote back in the day? When Top Secret first came out, the Cold War was fully going on, right? Cold War was the zeitgeist. It was what we were in the middle of. And people reminisce about the 80s, and people forget, like, we didn't know if we were going to get nuked on any given day. I mean, that was a real existential threat of the 80s that people forget about. So what is the zeitgeist of New World Order since it came out in 2020? Right?
Well, I believe 2017, but I'd have to check.
Oh, was it 2017? Is it?
I can find it. But
it was 2017. It kickstarted in 2017.
Well, the zeitgeist, you'll love this, is no longer the Cold War with Russians versus the United States. It's now the war against terror. And as you might have noticed, we do have that problem in our world. We also, one of the things I did to improve my schematic diagram, you just may have heard about it today, we now can trade spies for agents from other countries. And that is a new twist that has been around for a long, long time in warfare. But your agent might get captured, held, and then come back to the game because he's been traded for 1,000 soldiers on the battlefield. The trade in spies is something I haven't tried before. The level you are determines your value to the other side, so you can actually do a mathematical trade of who's worth it to whom. Right. So I would say the new zeitgeist is the war against terror. Now, you will notice we have different countries in the world, South Sudan being one. Doesn't take a lot of imagination to look at the real map and say, okay, is there going to be a new country popping up in the Middle East or in Africa or in Europe? That's all happened in the past 40 years. We keep changing the map. So you can have new players and the old players. So the KGB has been renamed. I think it's the FSB or whatever it is now. You have a lot of old spies that are still operating. They might even be influencing us through social media, etc. So the world is more electronic, but the world of the human intelligence goes on. You still need humans to run around and do things. I heard a story where they were taking satellite photos to see if a new tank on the proving ground, what was the size of the tank? Well, from satellites, they thought they could measure. So if it had more different size ammunition or whatever, it was easier to just send an agent in, cut the padlock, go in with a ruler, measure the width of the muzzle on the new tank to find out if they had new ammunition for these tanks, and then on his way out, put a new padlock back on the gate. Now that's human intelligence. Wonderful for mission. We cannot always rely on the accuracy of our signal intelligence. The good guys and the bad guys are pretty good at I'll give you another one. Drone warfare. Drone warfare is big now. In fact, we were fighting in Yemen during previous administrations, and we were sitting here in the United States flying drones over Yemen, killing their leaders. I shouldn't say leaders of Yemen, but people that
Terrorist leaders and
not, yeah,
whatnot.
terrorists that were not happy about us. So
Right.
there's enough material. Mike Carr will send me clippings from the New York Times regarding espionage irregularly. And so here's a 40-year relationship, 45-year relationship. He's still sending me clippings from the newspaper regarding espionage. I guess.
Yeah, it's still out there. I mean, there's still, spies get caught all the time. Spies don't get caught all the time. It's still out there. Just before, it was like the incredibly dramatic, very clear line drawn between, the East and the West and, Russia. And so you had, that, I hate to say romantic, but it was romanticized, whatever. So there's still plenty of, I guess, material for exciting espionage role play. Like Steve Jackson Games actually got raided by the FBI famously at one point over one of their games because they were like, how could you know all this stuff or whatever? Did you or TSR ever receive any inquiries or visits or from the U.S. government over top secret?
Oh yes. In fact, you can read about it in one of the books where I'm a footnote. Basically, they were playtesting Top Secret in Lake Geneva, and they started a campaign version, and people were writing notes to each other regarding their campaign game. And one of the pieces of paper got lost on the streets of Lake Geneva, picked up by a citizen who took it to the local police department, who called the FBI. And the FBI agent shows up at TSR and wants to know, who is William Weatherby and why does someone want to assassinate him in Beirut, Lebanon? Well, this is all fictitious. And so
Right.
Mike Carr or others at TSR had to explain to the FBI, this is a role-playing game and we're testing it. Now, how I found out about it was they sent me a press release, and it read, a game so real it fooled the FBI. So they were getting mileage out of this at the time.
I would frame that. I would have framed that and put it on my wall. That's great.
But it's great. The FBI agent hung around their offices for about a week and kept moving his car up and down the street. And he went away.
You should they should have invited him in to play. Say, hey, you need to take this back to Quantico and you can use it for your training back at Quantico. So
well, I guess
I love stuff like that.
The parting shot was the agent, when hearing that it was only a game, said, okay, this time. So, yeah.
Okay, what does that even mean? Like he's got to play the heavy.
Yes, it's a part of top secret history that it did influence. The FBI did investigate it before it was published. That's always a fun fact.
That is funny.
And there are many stories I could tell you about service personnel playing top secret aboard nuclear submarines under the polar ice cap, or there'd be aircraft circling Russia. And when these bombers were off duty, the personnel would be playing top secret in the aircraft circling Russia. So I get these stories from service personnel as well as civilians, but it's hard to make up that kind of stuff. That's why I enjoy hearing from the gamers, from the players. Yes.
Well, I will say that the majority of the real life top secret world is pretty boring. I actually, when I was in the Air Force, I had and this is all I'll say about it, I had a top secret SCI at a couple of different stations, and it was not exciting at all. In fact, they made a movie about one of my duty stations because of a Korean airliner that got shot down. You may remember that in the late 80s. and the way they portrayed our installation was so Hollywood. We were like laughing and everything. But anyway, that's all I'll say about that. I want to wrap up. You've been incredibly gracious with your time. I want to end on this note. One, folks, top secret New World Order. You can get it now. It's out there. Check it out. I've got a copy. Solarian Games, who's evidently also doing HackNoia, published it. It's out there. Check it out. There are supplements for it and things like that. So if this sounds fun to you at all, check it out. I had a note here. I was going to ask earlier and I forgot. Many times in your resume, you mentioned that you wrote along with Jackie Rasmussen, who I assume is your wife.
Oh, yes.
So tell me a little about that. What's it like writing with your wife? What does she contribute, and that kind of thing.
Jackie has a better education as a writer than I do. She has a degree in library science as well as in teaching. With a minor in, I guess she has a degree in. She's a teacher and a librarian. Let's put it that way. And she is my sounding board, and she'll tell me this sounds stupid, Merle, change that. And you need an honest sounding board so you don't embarrass yourself when you send things off to publishers. Now, she does a lot of research for me. I was working with mythological creatures, and she did 3x5 index cards of every mythological creature we could find, and that was turned into Rasmussen's Planetarium, which is a product from Frog God Games, science fiction supplement. She's been my wife for 41 plus years, and we bounce ideas off each other. She makes me laugh. I will try to use some term like the aliens have no hair on their heads. They're skinheads. And she said, no, do not call your aliens skinheads. You need someone to hear what you're saying, someone to read the manuscript. Very good to have a research assistant. Very good to have a sounding board, an honest sounding board. We married. I moved to Lake Geneva in June, and we were married in September of that year. So we have fond memories of our first 2 years in Lake Geneva as a new married couple. And nowadays, we travel together. We go to conventions together. She helps watch my time so I don't run out during a convention. You might have a 4-hour event, and I'm running it up to 3 hours and 45 minutes, and she'll say, you got to finish in 15. She'll watch the table when we take a break so nobody steals our props. I play with a lot of props, including Lego, and then a lot of fun props that are spy related. And of course, I dress in costumes. Well, she'll say, you got to take your tuxedo with you. You got to get your hats. You got to have the right things at the right place. So she's my right-hand man. I guess that's one way to say it.
That's great. Yeah, she was at the booth with you at when we were talking at North Texas, and she seemed very lovely and very nice. All right. So final question for you. During a game of Top Secret, have you ever managed to work in the phrase, missed it by that much?
Probably. I have probably done that. It's one of my more favorite phrases. It's Maxwell Smart, and I will often say that's the second largest one I've ever seen in my life. She had some good catchphrases. I missed it by that much. I did do that. I was in a dunk tank, and people were throwing baseballs at the target, and I would harangue them from my perch and say, missed it by that much.
That much. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you ever use the cones of silence?
I have not. That is one thing I have not used.
The cones of silence. I love Get Smart. It's such a great show.
I think your interview has been very in depth. I don't often get to talk. I have a gift for gab, so I hope you got the material that you need. Yes.
I did. It's been fantastic. I've appreciated it so much. We've gone a little bit longer than I intended because you've been such a wonderful guest. Again, thank you for your time. Now, it's a tradition on Shane Plays that I always end with the bad joke of the week. Now, it's not a weekly podcast anymore. It actually used to be a weekly radio show and podcast, but now it's just roughly once a month. But bad joke of the week just has a good ring to it. So I still call it the bad joke of the week. Now, in honor of espionage related topic, I picked out some bad jokes for you here, Merle. So here we go.
Okay.
Did you hear James Bond slept through an earthquake?
Well, no, I didn't hear that.
Well, he was shaken but not stirred.
Oh, thank you. I should have seen that coming.
Yes. All right. We have more. All right. What sound does James Bond's doorbell make?
I have no idea.
Dong. Ding dong.
Did you write these yourself?
No. But they're supposed to be bad. Yeah.
They're bad.
Ding dong. Yeah, if the worse they are, the better. They're not supposed to be good. And then finally, I just saw James Bond making burgers. Turns out, Merle, that he has a license to grill.
Well, perhaps on that note, you should stop telling jokes and end my misery.
They're supposed to be bad. Now, Merle, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time. I'm glad that you still got. I'm glad you're still out there doing games. You got folks. There's Top Secret New World Order out there. There's HackNoia coming soon. So Merle is by no means done with designing games. So thanks again.
Thank you for having me, Shane.
Everybody else, we will catch you next time on Shane Plays. Thanks so much for listening to Shane Plays Geek Talk. I certainly hope you enjoyed this journey into the things we love. For your convenience, show notes with helpful links for each episode can always be found at shaneplays.com. You can catch the podcast in several places, including on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, Verbal, YouTube, and more. If you like what you hear and would like to support Shane Plays Geek Talk, you can do so for as little as $1 per episode on Patreon at patreon.com/ShanePlays. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Stay geeky, my friends.